Hi guys, this is Brittany from Imagine This, a music and art studio for both children and adults, and today we are going over our most advanced class, Art 3. We will be continuing with faces. Now we mentioned last week that you should have a sketchbook if you come by the studio, and if not, just some paper will work out great. But today we are going to be focusing on lips specifically. And so all you will need for this lesson is that sketchbook that we've provided, or just some paper, a pencil, which you should have lying around, and then an eraser. It can be a pink eraser or a knitted eraser, just any eraser works. And before we begin, I just want to say that you don't get discouraged. Learning lips can be a hard thing to do. As Bob Ross once said, there are no mistakes, only happy accidents. So let's get started. Alright, so like with other lessons that we have done so far, everybody's lips are different, but we're just going to be teaching the general proportions and how to draw lips. So there are two different ways of doing it. I will first show you the way that I've learned and then the other method that I've seen online. But lips, how people like to dissect them is with circles. Now shapes are really helpful when developing faces, as we've gone over before. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to develop the upper lip. And to do that, I like to focus on the Cupid's bow of the mouth. And how we develop this is with two circles right next to each other. Now you'll notice putting these two circles right next to each other, it creates that little bow, the Cupid's bow right here, and creates a nice curve that we can go off of. So this in turn creates the top points of the lip for the Cupid's bow. Now for the underside, I'm going to just draw a straight line going across, and this will be the middle of the mouth. And so if I go back up to that Cupid's bow point and I draw over those two circles to emphasize that point and draw down towards my center line or the center of the mouth, then we have a top lip. Now for the bottom lip, there are several different methods that I have seen, but generally what I like to do is create sort of a long oval shape. Now depending on how big you make this oval is how big the lip is going to be. So if I want a really nice and thin lip, I'm going to draw a thinner circle. If I want a bigger one, I'm going to draw a very big circle. Then what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to curve off of that circle, meeting up with the line at the center of the mouth. I'm going to do it off the other side, curving in to meet the top of the lip on the center line. So now I have lips with lots of shapes inside. So what I can do is get rid of these guiding shapes that I've created with circles. So I'm just going to take my eraser and get rid of those guiding lines I have for myself. And this is where you can start adding some detailing to it as well. For a straight mouth, this would be a perfect line. But if I want to add just a little opening right in the middle to emphasize the mouth about to open, just create a small curve just underneath the point of the Cupid's bow. And so there you just have a regular mouth. And of course you can add in more detailing as well. You can add lines for the lines of your lip. You want them to be really subtle, just because if they're really profound, it makes it look like really chapped lips. But if that's the look you're going for, totally emphasize it. Just going to draw a few lines starting from the center of the mouth going outward on both sides of the lips. And mine are a little dark, so I'm just going to take my eraser and lighten them up just a little bit. Then of course you are welcome to do shading as well. Typically, depending on where the light is, I've heard that the lower lip tends to be a little bit darker than the upper lip just because the upper lip catches more light. So what I'm going to do is start with the corners of the mouth and darken it up ever so slightly. Darken it just underneath that center line on the bottom lip, making sure I get those corners. What I can do is I can take my finger or blending stump and just gently move around the pencil markings to create shading. I'm going to darken my middle line. And then of course there needs to be a little shading on the top too, but not nearly as dark as the bottom lip. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to gently create shading over in the corner again. Some a little bit underneath the Cupid's bow. then use my finger or a blending stump to blend it out. Going with my eraser, just create a few highlights on the top of the lips and lighten up some of it just a little bit so there's a contrast between the top and bottom lip. Right, and there we have a pair of lips. Now the other technique we can use is pretty similar, using shapes, but not nearly as much. So with the other technique, you start off with a straight line, and then you create a little mound on top of it, almost like the sunset coming up in Lion King. And this will be your top lip. Now in a cartoon like Kim Possible, this is pretty common and they don't alter it at all, they just leave a nice top lip. But if you want it to be more realistic, this is when you start to carve into it like a sculpture. For the Cupid's bow, I'm just going to create a little V shape in the center before going on the sides and following that shape. I'm going to go in and erase that line in between where I've set my Cupid's bow. Then you're basically going to do the same thing on the bottom, almost like a reflected sunset over the horizon. And so that is another way to do lips as well. Now again, you can go into this and really personalize it, change the lips up so they're a little more realistic, or maybe you want to give them more character. But then after this point, once you have the outline and overall shape of the lips, is when you can go in and start adding details that we've added to the last one. So lines for the lips. I'm just doing this very quickly, but please take your time, have fun, try different size lips, make them big or small. It's all altered simply by how big a shape is that you use as your guidelines. Just going to gently tap out those harsh lines. Then add that shading in, mostly focusing on those dark corners on the bottom, a little bit under the middle line on the bottom. Using my finger or a stump or a paper towel, I'm going to gently rub in the shading. Then emphasize that line again, do some shading on the top as well. Corners. Right, and there you have it. 2 different ways to make lips. Now you can try one way, and if you like it more than the other, there's no wrong way of doing it. So choose which way you like it, experiment with both, and try all sorts of different sizes. That's all we have for this week, and we hope that you have a fun time in this activity. We'd love to see your images, and have a good day.